What's up, everybody? It's Grim, and you're watching Thrash Maniac 99 Wrestling, Gaming, and Metal videos. Hit the real intro.
What's up, everybody watching on the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel? We are back for episode 13, is it? Of the Horsemen Podcast. And, woo! We got quite an episode for you guys today, as we are going to be talking death metal albums. We did black metal last time. We're doing the other extreme form of metal, death metal, but of course, the usuals are here. Please welcome Hannah Klein all the way from Germany.
Hello.
Of course, we have the everyone's favorite Portuguese crazy nut, Artur Felipe Castana.
So crazy.
Not this.
Of course, yours truly, Levi, Thrash Maniac 99, and then last but certainly not least, if he's even there, the cursed lagger himself, Ricky, a.k.a. Horror Master. Oh, his voice is gone. Oh well. So,
I think that we need to do just mic only.
Yeah, maybe he'll have to do mic only, if that'll work. So, for this time,
I think he needs to set letters.
Yeah. So, for this episode, yes, we are talking our favorite death metal albums. Now, the original plan for this episode, we was going to have Bradley Zordragger from Exclaim and Banger TV to join us, but we couldn't get him, unfortunately. But maybe another episode we'll be able to get him, and maybe another Banger TV member, particularly Blaine or DK or Sam. But someday we're going to make it happen.
Lisa as well. Lisa as well.
Well, she's gone now, unfortunately.
Oh.
Yeah, she left. So now it's Craig Mailman, the new producer. But that's another discussion for another time. So, before we get into our albums, something that we don't usually do for these episodes, and we ought to start doing them now for when we do these subgenre albums or bands, is do a quick run-through of how we got into the style or what about the style we like. I shall begin on this, considering I'm probably the biggest death metal fan out of the four of us here, even though I'm more of a thrash guy. Death metal is a very close second, and honestly, how I got into death metal was a natural extension from getting into thrash metal, from Metallica to Testament to Demolition Hammer. I wanted to hear something heavier and more extreme and brutal. By the time I got into high school, thanks to Metalocalypse of all things, with Death Clock, and that being a gateway, from there I discovered Cannibal Corpse, Morbid Angel, Death, Obituary, and here I am wearing a Broken Hope shirt, the latest of the classic death metal era that I got into. So that's my brief rundown of how I got into death metal. Artur.
I got into death metal mostly because of all the songs that I heard, mainly bands that are going to be here on the list, and I don't mind saying, like Asphyx, Bolt Thrower, and such. But still, many people said, "Hey, you gotta listen to Cannibal Corpse and also those bands," and that's how I became kind of pickish into death metal. There are some stuff of old school death metal that I enjoy most, like Obituary, but don't give me Cannibal Corpse, don't give me DSI, don't give me 6 Feet Under or anything of that such. I mean, I respect what they do and what they have done so far, but that's how I became picky in terms of death metal. But I still enjoy listening to one of them every now and then, especially some of those bands that I just named.
Alright, Hannah. Now, we all know, it's just similar to me from the Black Metal episode. I was the deer caught in the headlights, but I still had some good picks. Hannah,
Yeah.
what about you?
The thing is, when I got into metal, I discovered Dimmu Borgir and Amon Amarth at the same time. Like both bands, but I kind of followed the Dimmu Borgir path more than I followed the Amon Amarth path. I mean, I somehow got into the melodic death metal branch and death doom and a lot of doom also. True death metal, I mean, I have some records and I listen to them occasionally, but it's not on my heavy rotation or list, let's put it this way. I appreciate it, but it's not my favorite kind of genre. That's just how it is. And what strikes me most about death metal is definitely the album cover artwork. That's what caught my attention long before the music. I mean, I will talk about it on my list because there's some stuff I only discovered because of the album cover artwork. But I'm somehow intrigued by it.
I was kind of the same way before I got into the music itself. Like, the album covers were quite gruesome depending on the band.
That's how I got to Iron Maiden in the first place.
Yeah. So, Ricky, if you're there, what about you? And right as I say that, he's gone. But we'll move on.
Yes to Mike. Yes to Mike.
Yeah, he's going to have to just use Mike only.
Yes to Mike.
Well, let's just start with the honorable mentions list.
Yes, so honorable mentions, and I shall let Hannah begin on this one.
I have a few, not as many as last episode, but I want to mention Amorphous Tales from the Thousand Lakes.
It's on my list.
I was sure that it would be on your list, but for me, kind of only got on the honorable mentions because I like their later works with Tommy Jorgensen more than the original stuff. Then I've also got October Tide's Rain Without End on this list. With Jonas Renske from Catatonia, one of my favorite Melodeath records. Also Melodeath, Insomnium's Across the Dark and Winter's Gate, which I love.
Winter's
Gate. Especially Winter's Gate, great concept record. Saw them play it live in its entirety. Simply loved this record. And last but not least, Cattle Decapitations, The Anthropocene and Extinction, which I kind of like.
Prog death grind right there.
Yeah, but also some death metal.
Yeah. Well, at least until Ricky gets his shit together. Artur, your honorable mentions.
I do have some. I mean, I do have quite a number of them. I start with probably one of the albums that started the Swedish Gothenburg sound, Slaughter of the Soul by At the Gates. It's what started out the Melodeath movement. I mean, probably without Slaughter of the Soul, no In Flames, no Arch Enemy, no Gothenburg sound. Most likely. My first of two Asphyx albums on my list, and Levi knows this, and maybe Hannah also knows this because I've kind of mentioned I'm a sucker for Asphyx, and on my honorable mentions, their very first album. It's not the one. It wasn't. I don't think it was with Martin Van Druen just yet. The Rack.
Martin was on the Rack. Martin was on.
Then I'm sorry, but it's the very first album. The Rack is on my honorable mentions. Pestilence's Impulse Compulsion is also on my list as well. Especially for those that like Asphyx, you have to listen to one of his... I can understand. I know that face, Levi. I know that face. Hannah did the same thing to me with Tales. But nevertheless. And last but not least, I'll put one other just because out of respect. My fourth honorable mention, and you know this, that I, as I said, I'm a bit pickish of death metal, but I love Nile to death. In the Darkened Shrines by Nile is on my honorable mentions. There's also another one on my list. And just out of respect, out of everything that they have done, although I might not like Cannibal Corpse, I do respect everything that they have done. So, Tomb of the Mutilated is on my honorable mentions list. Just out of respect for what they have done for death metal.
Alright, on my honorable mentions, I got 7, starting off with Behemoth the Satanist on my list. I mean,
That's on my list too.
Mine too.
I mean, we could go do a whole episode. Like Ricky said a while back, we could do a whole episode talking about this album. Next up, in my opinion, the best German death metal band of all time, Morgoth's Cursed. Their first album. Basically, if death was from Germany, that's what this album is. But it doesn't sound like a ripoff, it sounds original, which is great. At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul as well. Pestilence, Consuming Impulse. Deicide self-titled debut. I mean, I may not be a big Deicide fan, but I do like their first two albums and Stench of Redemption. At least in my opinion, and Once Upon a Cross are their only good albums. Everything else, not so much. But that first self-titled album, brutality with a hint of blasphemy on top, was quite... Plus, I loved Glenn's vocal approach with highs and lows. Entombed, Left Hand Path. Ground Zero for Swedish death metal. And
What? Only on your honorable mentions list?
I'll talk about that whenever we get to my list. But and then the last honorable mention, Carcass Heartwork.
It's on my list too.
Both are on my list.
They came close. I mean, this was so hard. I even have a few ties on my list, but it was just so difficult. So
I'll put some ties as well. So I did the same thing with black metal. I mean, the trilogy, the Immortal trilogy, the Dark Throne trilogy.
yeah,
I constantly do that.
and I don't blame you because it can be tough. Ricky, is your stuff fixed?
I don't think so.
Nope.
Nope, he's frozen.
Yeah, I'm good.
Oh. Alright, well, Ricky, since you're finally back, quickly give us your honorable mentions. And now he's gone. What are we gonna do with you, Ricky, I swear?
He has to write letters.
Yeah. Or he's gonna have to go, or Ricky, if you can hear us,
I know.
or if you can hear us, Ricky, maybe to help with your connection, turn your camera off and just do microphone only. Maybe that'll help.
Yeah.
That is if you heard us right there.
Or
Okay,
you should use
so
the house phone and call you, Levi.
I'll put on Messenger.
alrighty. So now let's move on to our actual list, and I'll begin with number 10, which is a tie. First, Morbid Angel, Altars of Madness.
God damn it!
I have that!
I mean, what could be said about this album that hasn't been said already? 1989, when death metal was starting to rise up in the underground. This among so many great albums that came out in 89, but this one was one of the pinnacle. I mean, evil death metal at its best way before Deicide, Incantation, Immolation took that vibe.
And one of the first death metal bands to break Europe.
Thanks to Earache signing them, which was great. But, I mean, and if you ask me from a vocalist perspective, this, in my opinion, was David Vincent's best vocal performance of any album he's done. Close second would be their second album, Blessed Are the Sick, but I love that blasphemous vibe.
It's not bad either.
Yeah.
It's not bad either.
Yeah. So, that's my first choice with number 10, Altars of Madness. But my other choice, Artur brought up Nile. I got Amongst the Catacombs of Nephren Ka.
Not again! Not again! It's on my list too.
I mean,
Catacombs.
yeah, Catacombs, the first Nile album I ever got, and it's fucking brutal. Like, before they became tech death, this was more of their brutal death album with some tech elements, which I really, really like. I mean, my favorite tune on this is Stones of Sorrow, just for its pummeling rhythm. Yep. Fucking love this album. So that's my number 10. Morbid Angel, Altars of Madness, and Niles Amongst the Catacombs of Nephren Ka. Artur.
Many people will hate me for this, but I'm not a fan of Cataclysm at all. I think that they're bad. But the ironic thing about it is, although I got here Ricky's honorable mentions. Son of a gun!
Let's see. So Ricky's honorable mentions, he had Messiah's Choir of Horrors, Bolt Thrower's Realms of Chaos, and Pestilence Consuming Impulse.
That's why the son of a gun. But I don't like Cataclysm. But
I'm not a big fan of Cataclysm either.
I love Ex Deo. I mean, death metal, Roman history being taught in death metal terms. I love it. Even though they're the same guys, but they're dressed in the same battle armors as the legionnaires were. And so my first my number 10 death metal album, if you can call it that, you could call it melodeath, you could call it like that, 2009's Ex Deo Romulus, the first of possibly a trilogy of great albums by Ex Deo, which is basically Cataclysm and a one member or another from another band, I don't remember what, that played this death metal Roman theme. And Romulus, basically the rise of Rome. Basically, it's the rise of Rome as Rome was progressing, especially with the legends of the brothers Romulus and Remus. So, Ex Deo's Romulus, my number 10. And Raphael seems to be joining us.
Yeah, Raphael Fireblade, welcome aboard.
Hi.
Alright, so moving on to Hannah's number 10.
My number 10 is, and as we have seen the storm, we have embraced the eye by Chapel of Disease. Which is a German band, and they started out as a death metal band, but with every album that has come out, they have kind of moved more, or have incorporated more and more kind of heavy metal elements into the music, and I really dig the mix of the two. Just great solis, great vocals. It's mostly death metal vocals, and just very catchy for a death metal band. And I saw them live, blew me away. I had never heard of them, and they just blew me away. And that's very unusual for a death metal band and me.
Alright, Raphael Fireblade, before we get to your number 10, do you have any honorable mentions you'd like to share?
I think he's...
Oh no, Raphael's got the Ricky syndrome. No! We can't catch a break with some of these guys, can we?
No.
Well, I guess that's a signal to go straight to number 9 then. My number 9, Artur's gonna be so mad. He's gonna be so mad. Or be happy. My number 9, Asphyx, Last One on Earth.
Only at number 9?
It's hard! It's hard! It's hard to do these, but yeah, Last One on Earth.
I'm on both sides. I'm happy because
we got great minds.
But 9 just, but I can understand. That doesn't mean that I'm dead. But yeah, that's the album on my list. Last One on Earth.
Yeah, I mean the second album and the last one with Martin Van Drunen for quite a long time, and if you ask me, this as well, for me personally being a fan of Asphyx with Martin, this and Death Hammer are very close to me because I love Death Hammer. But Last One on Earth, fucking Death Doom at its most glorious. Taking what somebody in the comments of the Death Doom episode said, taking what Autopsy had started and perfected it. And yeah, and also look at that album cover, a zombie priest. That's pretty fucking cool. So, and of course the title track, probably one of my all-time favorite death metal songs of all time. Not just Death Doom, but death metal as a whole. The title track's amazing. So that's my number 9. Artur.
Ricky kind of spoiled already my number 9. And he spoiled last time with the black metal episode. He spoiled again right now. I mean, Behemoth said. I mean, you can call it Black and Death and such, but and I was kind of tempted to put either Decade of Therion or even Evangelion here on this list, but how can I go against a classic?
That's true.
So, Satanist it is. We have talked about Satanist from top to end all the time. Great songs like Gabriel Mesnoir and the Almighty Father Satan or Son, which puts an eternal benchmark on an eternal benchmark on future Behemoth albums from here on in. Iliad was good. Iliad was great. It was awesome, but Satanist just a little better. Number 9, Satanist.
Hannah?
My number 9 is Repugnance, Epitome of Darkness, which was one of the first kind of true death metal records I really liked. Like the horror theme on the songs, like the songwriting, the mix of and the kind of thrash elements on this record. Yep.
And Ricky and his giant faces here. Taking up the spotlight. Yeah, still lagging. We said for you to not use your camera and hope that would help your stuff.
Yeah.
Alright, Mr. Fireblade, if you're with us, what's your number 10 and number 9?
Cursed lagging.
Oh, Ricky, you've infected Raphael too. What a shame.
At least it's not me again.
Shut up.
Yeah, the problem is everyone just started freezing, so I leave and.
Well, Raphael, what's your number 10 and number 9? Nah. Damn it, Ricky.
Just doesn't
Damn
work.
it, Leroy.
Go back.
I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry.
I guess, again, that's our cue to move on, I guess. Anytime them two lag, it's our cue. And if they could get stabilized, we'll get back to them. Moving on to number 8. This time I'll let Hannah begin.
I've talked about it a lot. I love this album. It's Illuminate the Path by An Abstract Illusion.
Mm-hmm.
This is more heading towards the progressive melodic kind of death metal regions. I mean, probably not the most obvious choice, but I love this album to death, and I won't stop with this record, so it had to be on this list.
Alright, Artur.
And I kind of spoiled a bit one of my choices again, but like I said, I don't mind. But yeah, I've always been more into the mellow death type stuff. That's why I do enjoy Maya Monamarth, if you can call it mellow death. I love Dark Tranquility. I love also Catatonia, Paradise Lost, and such. If you can call it like that, but there's something about Amorphosis' Tales of a Thousand Lakes that just pushes me to another direction. I mean, it's not entirely death metal, but it's also atmospheric. It's melodic. It's a masterpiece. I could have put here Skyforger. I could have put here probably one of my favorite albums of their discography, Silent Waters, but it always brings me back to Tales of a Thousand Lakes. That's my number 8. Amorphosis, Tales of a Thousand Lakes. Not entirely death metal, but there's something that even for death metal listeners, that makes you go, wow. So neat.
Yeah.
So, Tales of a Thousand Lakes.
And real quick, before I get into my number 8, there was one last honorable mention I completely forgot about, and this might be a controversial one because the band is not known as death metal, but this was their only death metal album, Fear Factory, Soul of a New Machine. I know that...
What?
Yeah. I would consider it a death metal album before they became a staple in industrial, but...
Please don't say you have Sepultura on your list.
I don't. You're safe from that. You're safe. Well, now that you mention it...
No! Hey, my camera's but for this guy, no,
Papa
mister.
Dan already ruined that list. Don't you dare!
I'm not. I'm just working Ricky up. I'm just working him like I'm working the boys. I'm working the boys like in wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, anyways, now to my actual number 8. It's another tie. Now, both of these are companion, if you ask me, because they both lean on the thrashier end of the scale. One of the albums you would probably consider to be a thrash album that was influential on death metal, or you would call it a death metal album with thrash elements. The other one, death thrash fusion for sure. First, Possessed Seven Churches.
Not again!
Now, I've debated in my head for a long time if whether or not I could call this a straight-up death metal album or death thrash or just a thrash album with Lemmy and Exodus-style vocals. I would just call it like a proto-death album that fits into thrash, but it's still very influential and I love it to death. I mean, the song death metal, love it. Holy Hell, Pentagram, The Exorcist, amazing. And then the
Spoiler
other one...
alert! Spoiler alert, that's on my list, a bit higher.
And for once, Ricky's not lagging so bad. We'll get to him in just a moment. But, and then my other number 8, Massacre from Beyond.
Ooh!
Highly underrated, if you ask me, because after this album, they kind of went down the toilet because they put out their album Promise in '96, which a lot of people hate. There are a few gems on that album I like, but as a whole album, it's terrible. And then their return album, Back from Beyond, wasn't that good 5 years ago. This is their only great album, but it was so hard to follow this up. I mean, all these guys formerly in Death, Rick, Terry, Bill, and Cam Lee on vocals. I mean, even the bonus tracks from their Inhuman Condition EP are on here, including Venom's Warhead cover with Kronos on vocals. With Cam Lee doing the Warhead in the background while Kronos was going on, which was badass. So, I mean, my favorite track on here, Biohazard, and I could remember the lyrics off that song because I sing along to that tune all the time. So, my number 8's Possessed Seven Churches and Massacre from Beyond. Ricky, while we got you, what's your number 10, number 9, and number 8?
Number 10 is a pioneering album for brutal death metal, Cryptopsy, Non Solvaio.
I forgot about that.
They came to my town like probably 5 years ago. I wish I could have seen it live. I heard it was a badass show. But at the beginning, I couldn't understand shit for Non Solvaio. I thought they were just going like a fucking Cookie Monster on steroids.
That's a way to describe it.
But as I got more into the brutal death metal, I now understood the lyrics. I could actually listen to the lyrics. The plus. Number 9, and I'm not sure if anyone have mentioned it. I'm probably gonna be like, it's gonna be the F-bomb. Entomb, Left Hand Path.
I mentioned it on my honorable mentions.
It is on my list.
Oh yeah, I mean, arguably one of the best death metal albums of the late 80s, early 90s. Next to Slaughter the Soul. And my number 8, which to me, it's an underrated band, but this album's highly overrated, but I can see why. Autopsy's Severe Survival.
Autopsy's on my list. Autopsy's on my list.
Well.
But not that album. Not that album.
I prefer the alternate artwork than the original artwork.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with the surgery rather than the...
It's much, much better. But even, Autopsy, one of the pioneers of Death's Doom. I mean, a precursor, if you want to say that.
Yeah.
True.
But yeah, that's it.
All right, Raphael, are you there?
Yes.
All right, what's your number 10, number 9, and number 8 while we got you?
And now he's gone.
Oh.
Okay.
All right, what's your number 10, number 9, and number 8, Raphael?
Okay, number 10, number 9, and 8 would have to be. First, I'll start with Cannibal Corpse. First album with Chris Burns.
Ooh, Eating Back
But
to
a
Life.
lot of people would agree that, yeah, Eat Me Back to Life. A lot of people would say, yeah, a lot of people say Chris Burns is better than George Korsgrammer. Korsgrammer just has more raspier, more energy. I saw him live back in Fort Lauderdale. That dude has so much energy, more than Chris Burns has. For a big guy, that dude headbangs like there's no tomorrow.
The biggest neck in the world.
But honestly, and a bit of a spoiler, no Cannibal Corpse on my list. I do respect them, but I can't. It's the Cookie Monster growls just aren't aimed for me. I mean, I do listen to Cannibal Corpse once they're there, but to me, Cannibal Corpse is overrated. To me.
Agree.
Highly influential, but really overrated.
All right, your number 9, Raphael.
Number 9, I don't understand why this band is so underrated, especially if it has on from Morbid Angel. And would that have to be Hate Eternals upon the Destinless Band?
Ooh.
This band has Eric Rutan, one of the biggest legends in Morbid Angel. So I never understood why is this band so underrated. And when I tried getting Sam Dunn to mention them, he just more focused on the old generation. How can you not know the old generation and this is your legend if you're a big fan of Morbid Angel? Hate Eternal.
That's true.
True.
All right, there he is again. All right, and Raphael, you're number 8.
Number 8 would have to be Baltimore's The Fifth Crusade.
The Fourth
Son
Crusade.
of a-
What? What? Did he hear him? What did he say?
He said Bolt Throwers, The Fourth
Baltimore's
Crusade.
The Fifth.
The Fourth Crusade, yeah.
Artur!
If I had a Bolt Thrower album on my list, I would have went with either Fourth Crusade or In Battle There Is No Law. I would have went with one of those two.
I almost put a Bolt Thrower album, but I wanted to give the honor to Artur since I know he loves Bolt Thrower to death. A Fourth Crusade was a slim chance of being on the list, but I prefer Realms of Chaos, like I said before. But again, Bolt Thrower, arguably Artur's favorite black metal band. I mean, death metal band, maybe? I'm not sure.
Death metal.
Death metal.
They're death metal. And you do not want to say that to Josh Barnett. If you tell me he's black metal, he will destroy you.
Yes, he would.
He was known as a war master.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's on the
also he
album
won
cover of the new Amon Amarth album coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, the keyboard. The keyboard
Which unfortunately,
warrior. He's also in the musical keyboard warrior.
Which unfortunately, because of the polls, more people want me to review Ringworm over Amon Amarth. But I gotta go with that. But aside the point. So now we move on to our number 7. I shall begin. I got another tie. And this one, you want to talk about the ultimate companion. These two bands are like a marriage. Because both of these two bands, along with another band later on the list, pioneers of prog death metal. First, Edge of Sanity, Crimson.
Whoa.
In my opinion, the greatest progressive extreme metal album ever created. And without this album, Insomnium would not have done Winter's Gate. That's the truth, because with Crimson being a 40-minute song that has a duet at one point between Dan Swano and Michael Ackerfeld. Fucking beautiful, and it was clean vocals too that they did a duet on at about the 32.5-minute mark. Also, Michael showing off one of his best screams on this album, but Dan, his growl is quite amazing, but his clean voice sounds more closer to an adult contemporary singer than a metal singer, which is impressive. And speaking of Michael Ackerfeld, that brings me to Opeth Blackwater Park.
Oh, I forgot.
I put these two together because, well, Dan and Michael, they're like best friends and kind of started out at the same time. And pretty much Opeth perfected what Edge of Sanity started with Orchid, Morning Rise, My Arms Are Still Life, but this, arguably their most influential album and arguably their best album. Some people would say either Ghost Reveries or even Still Life. Still Life's very close, but I do love Blackwater Park a lot too.
Still Life as the bridge. I would put Still Life as the bridge. I would put with Still Life as the bridge between prog Opeth and death metal Opeth.
Absolutely. All right, Ricky, your number 7.
My number 7, and this album, well, this band to me, when I started listening to death metal, there was 2 types of death metal in my mind. There was the gore side of death metal, and there was the satanic side of death metal. And this album, to me, even upon the name, I'm like, oh, this has to be like satanic as fuck. That is Deicide's Once Upon the Cross.
Oh.
I mean...
Not Micah.
I mean, that album to me, first of all, the album cover, love the album cover. The title track's amazing. Like I said, I like it. The satanic side of death metal, I like it a bit more than the gore side. It's a hint for what will be laid up on the list. And, you know, I prefer this album before the others. So, yeah, Deicide, Once Upon the Cross.
And just real quick, like going back to what I was saying about Deicide when I brought up their self-titled debut on my honorable mentions. Like, yeah, they were a pioneer of that satanic side of death metal, but then again, Morbid Angel did it first, did it better, and also you had Immolation and Incantation coming up, Vital Remains, that, if you ask me, did it better than Deicide. No question. Raphael, you're number 7.
Number 7. Let's think about this one well. It will have to be Death's album.
The question is which one? Which one? Because all 7 of their albums are classics.
I know. Will have to be their first album. Of Death.
Oh, Scream Bloody Gore.
Scream Bloody Gore.
Yeah. It's kind of sad Chuck had to leave us already. I really want to see those guys live.
Cancer's a bitch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But if you ask me, this could be a topic for a future episode. What if Chuck didn't die? That would be a good episode.
No.
Because
anything? What if Freddie Mercury would have continued? What if Dimebag Darrell wasn't assassinated?
Warzone!
What if?
What
many.
What if Jimi Hendrix would have been still alive as well?
Yep. There's so many of these we could do. That would be like that could be a spin-off show from this. We could do spin-offs.
We can just call it What If Metal Vocalists or Rock Vocalists were still alive.
Yeah.
That
band breakup.
What if Neo was still alive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or
there's a lot of them.
Diva band, like, what if, I don't know, Dave Mustaine never left Metallica or never got fired from Metallica.
That would be the biggest one for sure.
Yeah, but back because like Hannah said, me and Hannah, we have to wake up early tomorrow for
so moving on. Hannah, you're number 7.
I couldn't decide which record I would choose from this band. I have 3 records actually from Vader, everybody's favorite Polish death metal band. I have Litany, I have Welcome to the Morbid Reich, and TB et Igni on this list. These are my 3 favorite Vader records. I think they haven't released a bad one. great band, love them, and one of the few death metal bands that I can listen to every day.
I forgot Vader list.
Damn, Vader. All right,
Well,
Artur. Artur, you're number 7.
Mine is a tie as well, but it's a tie between two great albums of this band. When I say Bill Steer, Jeff Walker, Michael Emmett, and Ken Owen, exactly. Exactly. I love Carcass, even though they could be considered gore, grind, or death metal as well. But it is a tie between what I consider their two best albums. First, Symphonies of Sickness. I mean, it's one of the few albums where you hear that raw, guttural sound which is amazing from both.
From both Bill and Jeff.
You have Bill Steer with the more deep growls in songs like Reek of Putrefaction against
and
Bill
Exhume
Steer,
to Consume, yeah.
against not Bill Steer, against Jeff Walker, who is more like Chuck Schuldiner type vocalist.
Almost like as if Chuck was doing black metal vocals, I would say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could say he's like the evil clone of Tom Angel Ripper of Sodom.
kind of mixed in with Marcel. I don't know if it's Marcel, but I think it's Marcel Schmier from Destruction. But it's Symphonies of Sickness, and also one of the more disgusting album covers you will ever see. Symphonies of Sickness.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd say Reek of Putrefaction was a little more gross.
Yeah.
But close.
But nevertheless, it's Symphonies of Sickness and later Heartwork, because Heartwork would be also kind of a transition to a more melodic side. Mm-hmm. Some would say proggish too, which is something that a lot of artists did. I mean, Human, anyone from Death?
Yep.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
What's that to say?
Wink.
But nevertheless, that's the time for me between number 7. It's Symphonies of Sickness and Heartwork, both by Carcass.
Alright, now we're at to number 6, and I shall begin. I got another tie. Now, first off, one of the two pioneers of brutal death metal, or the hybrid brutal tech death, Suffocation. Now, I could have went with any of their first 3 albums. I know a lot of people didn't like the production on Breeding to Spawn, their second album. I love it personally because it really helped the bass shine, and I've been listening to that album a lot. But I got this combo pack of Effigy of the Forgotten and Pierce from Within. But out of the two, Effigy of the Forgotten's my choice. 1991, one of the most brutal sounding albums ever created at the time, along with another album that will be on my list later. I mean, pioneering the breakdowns in death metal with the opening track Liege of Inveracity at that 2-minute 50-second mark. Dun 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 dun. Like, yeah, people won't like it because it helped pioneer deathcore, but then again, Brutal Death did the breakdown idea so much better. And you'll get why when we get to another band later. But my other choice, since Hannah brought up Vader, talking about Polish death metal, I went with my personal favorite Polish death metal band and album, Decapitated, Winds of Creation. Fucking amazing. I can't stop listening to the songs Way to Salvation and The Eye of Horus. Oh my god, classic tracks. And I mentioned this before on the show. They were all high school kids doing this album when it was recorded in 99, and their drummer was only like 14, 15 years old. Puts me to shame. And I'm 24 and I feel incompetent. Plus produced by Peter from Vader, and he did an amazing job on this album. I know a lot of people would call this tech death. I wouldn't say it is quite as much. I'd say it's death metal with tech elements, pretty much. But yeah, Winds of Creation by Decapitated and Suffocation, Effigy of the Forgotten at number 6. Ricky, take it away.
Number 6, sweet and simple, Morbid Angel, Chapel of the Ghouls.
You mean Altars of
Chapel
Madness?
of the Ghouls.
Altars of Madness.
Oh shit!
Well, that's a
Chapel
great
of the
song.
Ghouls is the song of
Yeah,
Altars of
Altars of
Madness.
Madness. Altars of Madness. I don't know why I put it there.
I guess that song's been in your head. You just put that on instead of the album.
Yeah, Altars of Madness. Altars of Madness. I mean, their best album ever. The hardest. I mean, and their latest albums are good, but it's hard to top off their debut. I mean, it's really rare when a band releases the debut album and it's so good that their later albums aren't as good as their debut. It's almost next to impossible. Yeah, I know. It's almost next to impossible to top it off.
I mean, yeah, the closest they got was Blessed Are the Sick, which was a very close second, if you ask me.
It's like if Behemoth would have released the Satanist as their debut album, and then they were everything else. Fuck me, if they would have done that, the Satanist would have still. I mean, still to it is their best album. But like, holy shit, how could you top it off? Altars of Madness.
Right. Alright, Raphael, you're number 6.
My number 6 will have to be Celtic Frost subtitled album. Did they make a subtitle? Oh wait, no, they didn't. The very first album. The very first album they ever made.
Oh, Morbid
Celtic
Tales.
Frost.
Morbid
Yeah,
Tale.
Morbid Tale. Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah, Proto-Death to an extent. I mean, that album's like Proto-Death and Proto-Black, if you ask me. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's fair. I don't know, if I would have went with Celtic Frost or Hellhammer, I would have put Hellhammer Apocalyptic Raids on my list, because that, to me, had more of a death metal sound to it. But yeah, Celtic Frost, I mean, without Celtic Frost, I mean, would we have death metal to an extent?
No.
Probably not.
What I found hilarious about Celtic Frost is when the lead singer Sam Dunn interviewed him, he said when they were Hellhammer, they were just making noise. And then they just decided, you know what, let's just change our name to Celtic Frost.
Yeah. and when speaking of old interviews, I remember watching an interview from Tom back in '85. He even wanted to be more considered death metal than black metal. So I guess to each their own, but yeah, very interesting choice there. Hannah, you're number 6.
With this album, what caught my attention was the alternative artwork. I'm talking about Autopsy's Savage Survival. I really like the bass on this record, which kind of stands out, and I think it's super brutal, like all of the songs on this record, especially Ridden with Disease and all those classics, and I think it's pretty brutal, and I especially like the cover.
Like I said, I prefer the alternative cover than the original.
Same here.
Yeah, the zombie medical surgeons, rather than the dude hooked and getting his tongue ripped out.
What's it?
Yeah, the main cover, the original cover was the dude
the
on
red
the
one.
on the
Yeah, I know.
hooks. Like,
I thought it was a woman.
who knows? All right, Artur, you're number 6.
Probably you already mentioned my number 6. Possessed, 7 Churches. I mean, I have more respect maybe for Possessed than I have for Cannibal Corpse and such, because Possessed have always been innovating their sound since their debut, Seven Churches. And
Yeah.
still to this day, if you want to talk death metal, you cannot do it without Possessed. and any and one guy who unfortunately gets an accident, who gets an unfortunate accident, but still on a wheelchair, still tours the world.
Yeah, Jeff Becerra.
There are, exactly, Jeff Becerra. That even though he still tours the world, when there are princesses and other idiots who, after getting a cold, they cancel entire tours, he has more respect for me as a performer than many of the so-called artists. But let's not avoid also the song itself. Songs of Seven Churches, your proto black death metal, if you want to call it like that. And just like another band that is going to be on my list, Death, the fathers of death metal. So, Seven Churches, Possessed.
And it's crazy to think next week they're finally their first album in 30-some years coming out, which is going to be awesome.
Some of their songs are not bad.
All right, now to our top 5. We're now into the bottom half of the show, and I shall begin. I got, this is the last tie I have. My number 5. I know how Artur feels about Cannibal Corpse, and I can get it, but for me, without Cannibal Corpse and Metalocalypse, I wouldn't be here as a death metal fan. But for my choice...
Is any of the Death albums on your list?
Yes. You just gotta wait. You gotta wait, motherfucker. But for my Cannibal Corpse album choice, I got, in my opinion, their best album, The Bleeding. From the year I was born, 94, and the final one with Chris Barnes.
Really? That was the year I was born, too.
But yeah, The Bleeding. But yeah, The Bleeding, in my opinion, Cannibal's best album. For me, a close second would either be Tomb of the Mutilated or Vile, the first one with George. But I mean, the opening track, Staring Through the Eyes of the Dead, so groovy and distorted and brutal. I love it. Fucked with a knife, stripped, raped, and strangled. But oddly enough, my favorite song on here is Return to Flesh, where they show a little bit of a melodic side to their sound, which was rare, with the guitar solos from Jack Owen and Rob Barrett, which was pretty cool. And this particular version includes a cover of The Exorcist by Possessed, which they did 2 years before this album. But yeah, and also Scott Burns, one of his best produced albums, really upped the ante on the heaviness on this album, which was amazing. And if you hear the backstory of how this album was made, like they were struggling at first, and Scott's like, you know what? You can finish your own fucking record. I'm out of here. Trying to do my best Scott Burns impersonation. Like, yeah, you go mix your own record. It's okay. But yeah, that's my first choice on number 5. And then my second one, for a good almost year, like junior, senior year in high school, I could not stop listening to this album, and I still love it to this day. You would all know this band as the fathers of grindcore, but this was when they decided to become more death metal, and still carry that sound a little bit to this day. Napalm Death, Harmony Corruption.
Oh.
Fucking love this album. Whereas before they did, 30 songs per album in just under 30 minutes. 11 tracks, 35, 40 minutes, which is amazing. And also the best lineup of the band of all time. Barney, Mitch, Jesse, Shane, and Mick. Note,
Barney's still with a mullet.
Yeah, with a mullet, and on the picture wearing a Scream Bloody Gore shirt, which was pretty cool. So, and of course, one track in particular, Unfit Earth, featuring John from Obituary and Glenn from Deicide on guest vocals, mixed in with Barney's roar. Fucking love it. So, that's my number 5s. Cannibal Corpse, Bleeding, Napalm Death, Harmony Corruption. Hannah, your number 5.
I've got two albums on my number 5 as well. The first one is Carcass's Hard Work. I mean, for obvious reason, it defined melodic death metal. It's without doubt my favorite Carcass album and love it to death. And then the second one is Amon Amarth, Twilight of the Thunder God.
Oh boy.
Which, in my opinion, I mean, it was my first melodic death metal record, and in my opinion, it's without doubt their masterpiece. And I think no album will ever touch Twilight of the Thunder God again. I mean, it's a great concept record about Norse mythology, great epics and battles, and with a guest appearance of Apocalyptica. I think it can't get any better from them.
And the guest appearance from the vocalist of Entombed.
LG Petrov, yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Artur, you're number 5.
Number 5. You already said it a million times. The best cowboy hat-wearing vocalist in death metal, and with the best sideburns in the world. David Vincent, Trey Asgaloth, Pete Sandoval. You already said it so many times. It's Altars of Madness by Morbid Angel.
I haven't said it yet. But I will.
Yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah. But they already said it. So, as I said, I mean, you already said it so many times. And I actually did this comment when I did the death metal episode. It was one of the first death metal bands, Florida death metal bands, that Digby signed, which made them ready for a European audience. But nevertheless, their songs are, even Chapel of Ghouls, as Ricky was saying, I mean, it has that creepy and yet epic sound to it, especially with the great solos by Trey. I mean, it's a masterpiece. I love Blessed Are the Sick. Covenant is also good. Ilion is shit. I'm sorry, but Ilion is shit.
On that one, I do agree.
Iliad, Divinium, and Sanus. Fuck that album.
Doesn't matter. But at least we still have probably 3, maybe 4 great albums, and it all starts with Altars of Madness.
All right, Ricky.
My number 5, which I gotta thank Artur for this one.
Whoa.
Asphyx, Last One on Earth. When we started, when Artur and I started talking, this was the record that he recommended me to listen to.
Ah, okay.
So Artur, he was the one that recommended me to
Uh-oh, he's gone again.
And,
Now,
I'm good. And this album, like I said, great album.
Levi has his copy.
Probably their best album. Artur, thank you again a million times for introducing me to them. I love that record. Even that artwork. Come on, it's like a fucking dead priest.
Zombie Priest, yep.
Priest. How much death metal get? Maybe there's another album that could get a bit more death metal, but that's just fucking like that's like I don't know. I'm just getting chills just thinking about it.
Well, before you have a heart or panic attack, Raphael, you're number 5.
Well, this band has been mentioned so many times. Probably considered first death metal band, but sadly they're the proto death metal band. That will have to be Seven Churches by Possessed.
Well, there we go. All right, now to number 4. This band has been brought up a few times, but not the album I picked. And that's Autopsy. I know Severed Survival's great, but if you ask me, their best work came 2 years later, Mental Funeral. In my opinion, like Asphyx, maybe the greatest Death Doom band of all time, but if you ask me what the greatest Death Doom album is, it's this. Because, I mean, hell, even in the liner notes, Chris Reifert and company all said that when they were making this album, they were heavily inspired by Sabbath, St. Vitus, Trouble, and wanted to take that, put it into their death metal sound, and wow. The raw production is amazing. I mean, songs like In the Grip of Winter, Torn from the Womb, Slaughter Day, Dark Crusade, which was their fastest song of the album with blast beats, but still having that doom speed to it in the second half. I mean,
the same Chris Reinford, one of the first members of Death.
Yep, who played on Scream Bloody Gore, which is great. I mean, Mental Funeral, and also that amazing album cover right there with the monsters eating flesh. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So, my number 4, Mental Funeral, Autopsy. Raphael, your number 4.
Well, this band's been mentioned again, Cannibal Corpse, Red Before Black, which I actually have that album. There.
Oh, not bad.
Interesting, their latest album.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised that no one dared to go to the Wells Street, Tomb of the Mutilated, Eaten Back Alive.
Well, I did mention Eating Back Alive.
Mention Eating Back to Life earlier, so...
No,
Yeah.
I also mentioned in my honorable mentions, but none going to put them on the list.
Except for me. I had Bleeding at number 5.
And I wish Sam could at least put it on the list when he made the lock rooms. But he never focuses on those type of bands.
I will never forgive Sam for putting Sepultura on the list. To this day, I will never forgive him.
I'll still make the argument. Morbid Visions at least is death metal to some degree.
Yeah,
but
that is true. But then after what?
He also had the chance to put Bolt Thrower in it, and he whiffed it.
Yeah, he just decided to put the old...
Could have put Suffocation on instead. I mean, I love None So Vile, but Suffocation should have been in before Cryptopsy.
Yes, he should have. And also, the band Jungle Rot should have stayed, even though they're kind of new to the death metal genre. But the guitarist had to go ahead and say, "Oh no, I like working with them, but they're too new, too essential." I was kind of disappointed on him on that.
All right.
Sorry guys, I'm gonna have my...
All right, Artur, you're number 4.
Just before I started, I started to design, but you all know how much I love Nile. Brutal or tech death metal from Texas. I think they're from Dallas, but Levi already. I have a two-way tie because I could not put these two since I love them very much, and I already put In Darkened Shrines in the honorable mentions list. But one of the albums Levi already mentioned, Among the Catacombs of Necron Ra, Niall's introduction to Niall's intro to the world, with some amazing songs, such as Serpent-Headed Mass, Smashing the Ant to You, Opening the Mouth. I mean, it's awesome.
Ramses, Bringer of War.
Exactly. But another one that I could not go without is 2005's Annihilation of the Wicked, especially with their own song Annihilation of the Wicked, which is 8 minutes, almost 10, but it's especially the intro where they go that low end sound. It's amazing. Dallas, when he was there, now it's Brad. Dallas, Carl, George Kolias, and I'll say something that it may shock someone. Some of us said Pete Sandoval as one of the best death metal drummers of all time. I'm sorry if I'm going to offend some people there on the chat as well. But
Kolias.
Exactly, George Kolias took what Sandoval did, and like Spinal Tap used to say, turn it up to 11. Although Sandoval is a close second. So my number 4, a two-way tie between Niall's Among the Catacombs and Annihilation of the... I could have put Idiphalic here as well because it was my...
I love that album too. Yeah.
But Catacombs and Annihilation, more than enough.
And real quick, if I were to put another drummer up there in that conversation, Mike Smith from Suffocation. So... Alright.
I don't know if I would put also one of the Eraldson brothers, either Adrian or Daniel. But that's a topic.
That's another. We'll do that episode someday in the future. Hannah, you're number 4.
My number 4 has been mentioned, I think, by everyone. It's Morbid Angel's Altars of Madness.
What else?
Yeah, what else? The only other album from Morbid Angel you could have put would have been Blessed Are the Sick, if you ask me. But yeah,
I mean, I had to go with this one, and I just love David Vincent's vocals. Saw him live with I Am Morbid. I mean, you can still understand him as evil. It's typical for death metal. There's nothing to hate about it, and I like this record, so it had to be there.
Ricky, you're number 4.
My number 4, and I'm probably gonna get some shit of why it's maybe this low on the list, but Death, Scream, Bloody Gore. Which, it's not my favorite death metal death record. There's another one, which I think you all know what it is. I've mentioned it before. But the influence on this record is highly, highly regarded. Probably the first death metal record, which I might disagree because there's another record, which I'll mention later. I mean, even Chuck even said he was influenced very much by the George Romero movies, the zombie movies. I mean, Evil Dead. Come on, Evil Dead. Evil Dead. My
Bruce
favorite
fucking
death.
Campbell.
Probably my death song of all time. With my second favorite death record. Even that album cover is amazing. Like, everything about the record's fantastic. A masterpiece. Highly regarded, influential, you name it. I just wish Chuck would have still been alive. I would have loved to see him play Evil Dead and just go to the mosh pit and get my fucking ass beat right there as he's screaming.
Don't forget to bring a chainsaw. You cannot do Evil Dead without a chainsaw.
Yeah.
yeah.
And also
All
don't
right,
forget the book, Eater.
All right, Raphael, you're number 4.
Number 4 would have to be Death's second album.
Leprosy.
Not again!
Again!
Yeah. Leprosy. I mean, come on. No, pretty much every Death album in general is one of the greatest and probably legends of death metal.
Yeah.
It's one of those bands that have never released a bad album.
And if you ask me, probably the number 1 band with a perfect discography. If you ask me.
Yeah.
You're gonna say both, aren't you, Artur?
Both.
I saw that coming.
Both Door just recently broke up, but they're still a legend no matter what.
They broke up over 10 years ago when their drummer Mark passed away.
Which was the youngest member they ever had.
Yeah.
But
now Carl Willis is in memoriam, and they got a new album coming soon, which should be cool.
It's basically Bull Thrower, but slower.
So almost a Death Doom type thing, almost.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
All right, so now to our
Josh Barnett to cover again.
that would be great. All right, now to our number 3. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. I shall begin. Now, this is in another combo pack, but I'm picking one from the 2. One of the godfathers of the Florida scene, along with Death and Morbid Angel. You can't, if you ask me, you can't talk about death metal without mentioning Obituary. Question is, which album?
Obituary.
Because if you ask me, the first 3 are cornerstones of the genre. I got a combo pack of... I got a combo of the first 2, Slowly We Rot and Cause of Death. However, if I were to choose one over the other, I go for Cause of Death any day. Especially because James Murphy, after doing Spiritual Healing for Death, and before he did another album that should have been on my honorable mentions, Death Shall Rise by Cancer. Before that, he did Cause of Death, brought amazing solos. Frank Watkins on bass, rest in peace. And this is, in my opinion, when the Obituary revolution truly began. Slowly We Rot's great, but I prefer Cause of Death because it was, in my opinion, a little heavier, a little more atmospheric. And, of course, fantastic cover of Celtic Frost Circle of the Tyrants. Probably, in my opinion, the best Celtic Frost cover song ever created. That or Opeth's version of Circle of the Tyrants. It's so close, but Cause of Death, my number 3. Hannah.
I'm kind of copying Ricky right now, what he did last episode. Although I'm not putting this album on number 1, but on number 3, and I'm talking about the Satanists.
Again.
I mean, we talked about it so much. It's such a great record, and for me, it's without doubt their best record, and probably the best blackened death metal record that has ever been released. I love it to death. Has to be on this list, and yeah, but I've also got an EP on my number 3 as well. That an EP probably every black metal fan loves when talking about death metal, and it's Morbid's December Moon.
Ooh.
Oh.
This, I mean,
That's
Morbid.
strong.
Yeah, Morbid.
That should have been an album, be honest with you.
Little
Yeah.
Swedish death metal band with Dead on vocals. Great EP. Shame that they never released a true album, but this is the true shit.
Not to mention LG, who went on to join Entombed, was on drums,
Yes.
which is impressive. All right, Raphael, you're number 3.
Number 3, Intune's a Left-Hand Path.
The Left-Hand Path.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you know, we were talking about with Morbid Angel Altars of Madness being so tough to follow up. Left Hand Path's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I mean, for
That's
me,
true.
the closest to it would be Clandestine, their second album, the year later. I know a lot of people like Wolverine Blues. I'm not a big fan of Wolverine Blues because I'm not a big fan of that death and roll style.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan of Wolverine Blues. But
The only song I ever liked from there was Hollow Man. That was, yeah. But as far as the vampires, I mean, come on, you guys should just stick to death metal. Like, seriously.
all right, Ricky, you're number 3.
My number 3, it's probably no surprise, At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul.
At the
There you
gates.
have it. I had that on my honorable mentions. I think Artur did too.
Mine as well.
Mhm.
All right, and Artur,
Yeah.
you're number 3.
This will come with no surprise, but for the first time, I have a 3-way tie. And
3-way tie.
yeah, because it's an asphyx tie, and it's an asphyx tie, and I'll explain why. My first of the 3-way tie, we have already mentioned, Last One on Earth. I mean, it's an amazing album. It's a beast of an album. I mean, Bismarck, the real Bismarck, not the Sabaton version of Bismarck. But still, it's a brutal album. And these two, I've put them there more for personal reasons. What? Because when Asphyx came to Portugal for the first time, I actually talked with Martin Van Druen, and I said that I was doing some search on YouTube some years ago, and I found about this song called Death Hammer, and that's how I got hooked to Asphyx. Death Hammer, I mean, it's a beast of an album, which Levi, I think, already made a cover out of one of their songs, We Doom You to Death.
Even though I took it down, I'll probably redo it another time someday.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I did a bass cover of that song, and I still like playing that on bass to this day.
but both Death the Brutal Way from 2009 and Death Hammer from 2012 are what makes this a three-way tie. Mostly because Death Hammer was the first song that I heard, then of course I heard the entire album of probably one of their best songs of all time, We Doom You to Death, and also Death the Brutal Way as well. So that's my Asphyx 3-way tie.
Alright, on to number 2, and while you guys talk number 2s, I'll be right back. So I'll let Artur start number 2.
Who?
You, Artur. Number
You.
2.
Okay. We say all the time that we always have at least one band. It has to be here, and we cannot talk about death metal, of course, without talking about Evil Chuck, Death. And some of you already talked Scream Bloody Gore and such, and I think Raphael was the one that said Leprosy. That's why
Yes.
my number 2 is another tie. But the reason why I put it is Leprosy. It's an amazing album. I mean, thanks also to Metal Evolution, because I knew Leprosy from such, but when I heard Pull the Plug, I knew that was the song that hooked me to it. And the other one, Human. I shitted on this album from quite a long time because, yeah, it divides the Death fans because it starts to become more proggy. But that's what Death was all about. They didn't want to stay stale. They wanted to innovate. Chuck said it in a million, whatever. But he said it in a lot of interviews. He wants to go far and beyond. That's why Human is such an amazing album. And I've heard a comment saying that Cosmic Sea, it's Death's Orion. I don't disagree with it in a bit. The instrumental, as I mentioned. So, number 2, Human and Leprosy by Death. R.I.P. Chuck.
All right, Hannah.
I also have Leprosy on my number 2. I mean, what hooked me about this record, much like with Autopsy, was the album cover. And for me, it's just the Death album I like to listen to the most, with songs like Pull the Plug, Born Dead, Open Casket, and the title track. I mean, it's just a classic record. I love it, despite death metal not being my favorite kind of music, but I like this record. And I mean, I respect Death, but I could never quite get into the other records, but this one I could. And I have to honor Chuck in putting it on number 2.
All right, Raphael.
Number 2 had to be Amon Amarth's Twilight Thunder, I believe it was.
Yeah, Twilight of
the Thunder, good.
Thunder, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the best melodic death metal albums you can ever hear.
If I had put Amon Amarth on my list, I would have actually went with Odin on our side.
That would be my second choice.
I would have gone even further back. I would have gone with the Avenger.
Oh yeah, that one.
All right, Ricky, you're number 2.
My number 2 is also a Death album. I already mentioned Scream Bloody Gore. Hannah and Artur already mentioned Leprosy and Human. But there's one album to me that's my favorite Death album, and it started with Human, and it went on to the final album, The Sound of Perseverance. I love Death, and if Chuck had been alive, he would have gone either made a solo band or would have continued that proggy side. That record to me is if you want to talk about progressive death metal, The Sound of Perseverance, top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yeah.
And one of the best covers of all time. I mean, Chuck screaming his guts out in Painkiller, especially that initial scream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the best
Imagine
high
Alpha
notes
tried
ever.
to do that stuff.
Imagine if Chuck could have got
He did
Rob
good.
Halford to do guest vocals for that cover with him. That would have been pretty good.
Yeah, but he had
that
to
would have
do
been
the scream.
epic.
He had to do the scream.
Shut up and take
Yeah,
my
to
money.
do a scream, and Rob would just have to do that normal high-pitched voice he does.
All right, my number 2. You guys know this. I have the shirt. Broken Hope,
Broken Hope.
one of the few American death metal bands that did not record at Moorsound during the golden age of the genre. In fact, they were a DIY band. They wanted to do it themselves. And for my choice, Swamped in Gore. The alternate cover with what looks like Donald Trump getting mutilated. Which is because he's got that hairdo. He's got that hair. But I mean...
It's not hair, it's a dead squirrel.
Yeah, that's a dead white squirrel on his head.
On Donald Trump's head.
But
no, so Andres is like all back, blonde, longer.
But I talk about this album and band all the time because I feel these guys don't get enough credit for creating brutal death metal a little bit before Suffocation and before Cannibal Corpse. And these guys get often compared to Cannibal Corpse and Suffocation because of, well, gory album covers, song titles like Bag Full of Parts, Dismembered Carcass, Devourer of Souls. But, I mean, they, similar to Bolt Thrower, bring a groove to death metal. Because, I mean, these guys, Obituary and Bolt Thrower, are the kings of groove in death metal. And if you ask me, Broken Hope does it the best when it comes to breakdowns in death metal, because I talk about the song Awakened by Stench all the time, that 90 seconds ending. You want to talk about what a true breakdown is in metal, listen to that part, because unlike deathcore or metalcore where they just focus on slamming, these guys do breakdowns right with great riff writing on top of the slow mid-tempo stuff. I also could have went with Bowels of Repugnance because that album's very underrated, but I went with Swamped in Gore because this, kind of like Altars of Madness, so hard to top, but yet Bowels of Repugnance was great as well. And they're back after the original vocalist died 9 years ago. And I hope they have a new album coming soon because I'd love to hear it. Jeremy Wagner, underrated guitarist. Swamped in Gore at number 2. So now to our number 1. And I know you guys have been waiting for this one. Which death album is it at my number 1? Well, I go through a phase with almost all their albums. Funny enough, the one that I'm the least familiar with is Sound of Perseverance. But the one that I could pick any of their albums, but if I want to go with the one that I've listened to the most, I'm going to go with a bit of an oddball choice, and that's Spiritual Healing. This was the album, I know Artur talked about with Human. This, in my opinion, was the album that began that movement towards a more melodic prog sound. Because, I mean, especially the title track at nearly 8 minutes long, and an amazing dual solo with Chuck and James Murphy. I mentioned him earlier talking about Obituary, Cause of Death. I mean, also songs like Killing Spree, Living Monstrosity, Altering the Future, like... It's gory, but more in the reality sense. Like, Living Monstrosity all about cocaine addiction, Spiritual Healing about corrupt religion, Killing Spree about serial killers, Altering the Future about abortion.
There isn't even one about suicide?
I would want to say Within the Mind, I think, is something like that.
Yeah.
Low Life about bad people, defensive personalities, genetic reconstruction. I mean... amazing songs, and I feel that's their most underrated album. I don't understand why. I guess because it came after Leprosy and before Human. It was just caught in the crossfires. It's kind of like So Far So Good So What from Megadeth being in between Peace Sells and Rust in Peace. Kind of the same situation. But yeah, my number 1, Death, Spiritual Healing, masterpiece. Artur, your number 1.
Bolt Thrower.
Is it?
Bolt Thrower.
I'm going Toruyano. It is Bolt Thrower. I mean, you guys hear me talk about this band all the time, and as I said, Sam Dunn putting Sepultura above Bolt Thrower. I mean, any other band could have been there, but not mentioning Bolt Thrower at all is blasphemous.
I'm surprised Josh Burnett didn't beat him up when he did the interview.
Well, hey, at the end of the day, at least they made it on the 2000s list with Those Once Loyal, so at least I got some cred there.
But Those Once Loyal, to me, Those Once Loyal, yeah, it's the last album that they ever did with Martin Keenan, the drummer, before he eventually passed away. But it's not my go-to album. I would go for maybe the first four, but I don't count In Battle There Is No Law. I'm counting Realms of Chaos. I'm counting Realms of Chaos. I'm counting War Master, Fourth Crusade, and even
Mercenary.
For
Victory.
Mercenary was actually Mercenary was my very first album that I heard of Bolt Thrower. But nevertheless, out of all those five, because I also love Mercenary, I would go straight for Realms of Chaos and the Fourth Crusade. With also, I'll say a bit honorable mentions, but I don't want to do a 5-way tie because that would be ridiculous. But Realms of Chaos, Fourth Crusade, but with special consideration, both Mercenary for Victory, and War Master. So, Realms of Chaos and the Fourth Crusade by both.
Hannah, you're number one.
My number one has been mentioned by everybody here. Guess what it is?
Namar.
No. Two.
Oh, left hand.
Left-hand path. I mean, without doubt, this is my favorite death metal record. I love the guitar sound on this record. I love the musical compositions and compositions in general.
Yeah.
I love the vocals. I love the lyrical themes of this record. And my favorite death metal song of all time is on here, and that's it's the title track. This with this horror movie innuendo, I just love it, and I think especially with the lyrics, they kind of did something different in comparison to what most American bands were doing, and mostly focusing on this kind of theistic approach to the Levi's satanic left-hand path, of course, and it kickstarted the whole Swedish death metal and mellow death scene that would later follow. Simply my favorite death metal record and groundbreaking. And I kind of prefer the European style with this, but yeah.
And I was going to mention earlier too that for me, when it came to death metal, I'm more of an American death metal or North American death metal guy than a European death metal guy. But I do love European death metal quite a bit too. It's just I grew up on the Moore Sound stuff. But just imagine if that guitar sound with that Boss HM2 pedal from Left Hand Path, imagine if Moore Sound did an album with that pedal. That could have been a groundbreaking album, depending on who would have done it. What if Bloodbath recorded at Moore Sound with that pedal? That could have been wow.
But, I mean, they did it in Sweden.
Yeah. Ricky, you're number one.
My number one has
it's the Satanist.
No.
Yeah.
My number one has already been mentioned. Can you guess which one it is?
Is it Obituary?
No.
Is it Death?
What?
Death?
You said, is it Death?
Nope.
Morbid Angel.
Nope.
Bolt Thrower,
I give up.
For sure.
No.
Asphyx.
I'll just say it. In my mind, the first death metal album.
Possessed.
The
Seven
Churches.
Like Art Levi said, yeah, it could be proto death metal, has more thrash elements and also no album elements. There's an interview Jeff Rashero did, I think 3 weeks ago, where he talks about he was highly influenced by Raven from the no album scene. But to me, they even have a song called Death Metal. They had a song in 84 called Death Metal, around the same time Death was Mantis at the time.
Of course.
Death,
That's-
Seven Churches came out in 85. Scream Blow the Gore came out in 87. And you're saying, oh, you're choosing by year. In a way, yeah, but to me, when I think of death metal, it's Death and Possessed. But I always have Possessed a bit more respect, because, I mean, like Artur said, Jeff Becerra, a guy in a fucking wheelchair, goes out and performs around the world. When you see pop artists, when they break their hand, when they break their leg, they cancel the tour for almost a year. This guy goes on tour, can't walk. He wishes he could walk and be amongst the crowd and just
And
go
play
there
bass
and
again.
celebrate.
Because he used to
Yeah.
play bass. He played bass on the first 2 albums.
Yeah.
I mean, Seven Churches,
he used
that
to sing,
entire
though.
album, it has my favorite Possessed song, The Exorcist. What more can I say?
Which I mentioned Cannibal Corpse covered on a EP in
Yes.
92, I think.
Yeah.
92, 93. Alright,
Album. The next week, it's coming up, the new album.
yeah, next week, Revelations of Oblivion.
I want from the tracks that he already released, they're fucking great. But yeah,
So true.
Alright, Raphael, quickly, you're number 1.
Morbid Angels, Altar of Madness.
We
Yeah.
all mentioned it.
How many
Yeah, we
albums
did.
are there in total that we agree upon? Morbid Angel, Possessed, Death,
Death. That's about Entomb, maybe,
Entombed?
Yeah, Entombed.
not me, not me.
and aspects.
Yeah,
You know something about, it's funny, Possess, Venom was kind of in the same situation as Possess with when they made the album Black Metal. And people say they're proto Black Metal. Which is
Yeah.
true. I mean, they do have more of a thrash metal sound, but if you hear the lyrics, that's just pure black metal.
Yeah.
And if anything, Seven Churches to me felt more black metal in lyrics than death metal.
I mean, I would say we could consider proto
But,
black
yeah.
metal.
Yeah. Possess would be the same thing. So it's like Bathory and Death are companion, Venom and Possessed are companion in
Yep.
both genres.
What Bathory did for Venom, Death did for Possessed. Possessed created it, Death perfected it.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And ladies
Came
and
up with the
gentlemen,
name and perfected
And
it.
some would say that they can add Sodom to that list.
that does it for this episode. This was a tough one for me with so many ties. But the next episode might be even tougher because episode 14, thrash metal albums, my realm of expertise.
Speaking of
That's
that,
where it's going to be tough because, there's so many great albums. And without thrash, there is no black metal, no death metal, no grindcore, nothing.
no metal
So-
at all.
And
No,
that,
No metal as we know it after Nawaba.
and that
There's
is also due to the new wave of British heavy metal.
Speaking of thrash metal, I'm actually going to see the band Slayer, Amon Amarth, and Cannibal Corpse next Saturday. Live.
And Lamb of God.
Yes.
Son
yes,
of a gun.
Yeah, Lamb of God.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this episode. Apologies to everyone who was expecting Bradley to join us. We just couldn't work out a date or when to get him on, but we will get him on here at some point.
And
It's
I
just
did
the right time, the right
did
topic, everything.
get much.
And we hope we'll get Sam as well.
Unfortunately, there's no chance in hell we're getting Sam. I asked him,
We'll
he
just
said
get-
there's no chance in hell.
We'll just get
Maybe
Bradley.
DK I think would be a little easier to get.
DK,
That would be
good.
fun. Blaine
Yeah,
would be
yeah.
funny because I think me and Artur could go back and forth with him on the comedy aspect.
And I will go back and forth with him. And he probably would have been laughing if one of us started lagging too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen,
All right.
thank you for watching. Peace out. Keep it metal. We'll see you soon.
See ya.